What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and this story surrounding the imploded Titanic sub is starting to heat up. Investigators went down to the mothership, I believe it's called the Polar Prince, which is the ship that takes out the sub out into the middle of the ocean so they can dive down to the Titanic and you name it. But these investigators, while they were on this ship, they pulled a bunch of data for their investigation. And I'm starting to look at this like, wait, this is starting to look like something beyond them just trying to figure out what went wrong with the sub. This is starting to look like something else. I really think that this story could take a whole entirely new turn in the coming days. Maybe I'm wrong, but from everything I've seen, they got like the logs of when they went out. They even pulled text messages between the sub and the mothership because that was the only way they could communicate. For those of you all who don't know, Stockton Rush chose purposely not to put much communication technology within the sub because he said that it was aggravating and irritating. If there was something and minor problems going wrong with the sub, I don't think he wanted the people above to know. He just wanted to go do what he wanted to do. Therefore, the only form of communication would be they would send these text messages back and forth every, I don't know, what was it? Every 15 to 30 minutes. Well, they have pulled those messages, but also they pulled voice recordings that they say will be very useful in their investigation. And that's where I'm really sitting here questioning what's going on. Why do you need the voice recordings? And from my understanding, it's not even voice recordings from the sub, although maybe there's voice recordings on the sub as well. But they pulled voice recordings from the ship. So it looks like they want to know what people were talking about on that ship. And listen, I'm no expert here. I don't know how much would be on these recordings. I don't know how far back these recordings go. But there's a possibility that there were some things said on that ship that could be incriminating. There could have been things said on that ship in past trips which would, confirm that there were problems with the sub, which we've already heard. There were problems with the sub, right? We've heard a lot about those problems. If you haven't heard about it, go back on my channel. I lost count how many videos I done made on the story. So we've gone over almost everything that you could go over. Don't get me wrong, we've got a lot of information to get to, but I'm covering all of my bases here. But I'm really wondering what could be on these voice recordings. Could there be something, some damning information? Could Stockton Rush have said something really bad? You know what I mean? Because if these voice recordings are so useful for your investigation, then it makes me think that they're taking a totally different angle on this investigation than what I thought they would. Because if you're simply trying to figure out what happened that day and why the sub imploded, I don't think voice recordings from that day would really help. But they seem to believe that these voice recordings will be really useful, which tells me that this is not just an investigation to find out why the sub imploded. I think that this investigation is going to go even further. And I'll make another video on my thoughts about that. But also, this recovery effort is underway because they want to recover all of the little itsy bitsy pieces of this sub that are now resting on the bottom of the ocean alongside the Titanic. I want you all to watch this clip really quick. They're going to talk about how much this is going to cost. And no one knows where the money is coming from. So basically, we're all paying for it. Let's go ahead and watch this clip. Before you do, hit that thumbs up button. It's totally free. You enjoy the videos. I enjoy making them. Hit the thumbs up button, why don't you? After you hit the thumbs up button, drop a comment. Let's watch this clip, and I'll be right back with more thoughts.
Let's get to the latest on the U.S. Coast Guard's investigation into the submersible that suffered a catastrophic implosion last week. A Marine Board of Investigation going to probe the sub's implosion. It's the highest level of investigation the Coast Guard conducts. Over the weekend, officials announcing that voice recordings from the support ship or the mothership were recovered and will be reviewed. Let's go to our Xavier Walton. Good morning to you. This is sure going to cost a lot of money, but I'm sure for the families, they're not thinking about cost. They're thinking about answers.
Yeah, Adrian, you really can't put a cost when it comes to a life, right? But right now, they are trying to recover debris from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean from the sub. But questions like you just mentioned, where is all the money going to come from? We're going to get into that later. First, though, let's start with the U.S. Coast Guard and the latest on their investigation into all of this. It'll continue by collecting debris from the wreckage and conducting interviews. Next, the Marine Board of Investigation is going to hold a public hearing. Then the board is going to release its findings in a full report. That'll include recommendations moving forward. However, there's no set date on when that may be. As a part of the process, too, officials will piece together exactly what happened and are going to review voice recordings from the ship that actually carried the vessel and its 5 passengers who we now know died instantly during the implosion.
During the course of the MBI, the board will first and primarily work to determine the cause of this marine casualty and the 5 associated deaths. The MBI, however, is also responsible for accountability aspects of the incident, and it can make recommendations to the proper authorities to pursue civil or criminal sanctions as necessary.
As necessary. And this morning, we're also learning more about OceanGate, that deep sea exploration company. It received $450,000 in PPP government loans during the pandemic. As for the search that really lasted days and took several countries, according to a report in the New York Times, quote, probably going to cost millions. Question is, who is footing the bill, right? Who's paying for it all? According to the Coast Guard, as a matter of Homeland Security policy, the Guard never asks a private company or individual to reimburse the government for the costs associated with those search and rescue efforts. In the meantime, officials really haven't said exactly how much it costs, though last week, according to the Department of Defense, the DoD, they said the money spent, Adrian, was already budgeted.
So the fact that they are diving to the bottom of the ocean to collect pieces of this imploded OceanGate sub does not surprise me. We all saw that one coming. And, if this investigation is about figuring out how the sub imploded and figuring out, how we could prevent this from happening again, then yeah, it's understandable that they would get pieces of the sub, even though I don't think it's necessary. But the voice recordings that's what really sticks out to me. The fact that the investigators showed up at the mothership, hopped aboard, and confiscated the voyage data recorder, which basically records all of the audio in the ship's bridge. So basically where the pilot of the ship is, the captain, where they're steering the ship, they got all of the audio that's recorded in that room. And I'm just wondering what could have been said there. We already know that Stockton Rush was, he was kind of pushy. In all honesty, he was kind of pushy and desperately trying to get people to buy tickets on his sub, trying to convince them that they're safe, that his product was safe, that his sub was safe. And he would disregard people's feelings. He would blow off people's feelings as if their thoughts and their opinions were dumb. Like, people would literally say, oh, I don't know if this is safe. That's dumb. This is, of course, safe. And, I'm just wondering what type of audio may have been recorded in that bridge. For all we know, Stockton Rush could have been on that bridge convincing people to get in the sub. We don't know. But the fact that they pulled that audio, it really shows me that they're looking into this from different angles. They're not just trying to figure out what went wrong with the sub that day. Because when trying to figure out what went wrong with the sub that day, audio recordings of what happened in the bridge is not going to help you. We know they went down to dive to the Titanic and it imploded along the way. There's no audio recordings from the bridge that's going to help you to determine what happened because there's no communication from the sub to the bridge of that ship. Yes, there's text messages. They pulled those as well. But there's no audio. It's not like they're calling people from the sub, telling the people on the ship, yeah, we're about to implode. Yeah, this is what's happening. No, none of that. So the fact that they pulled those recordings makes me think that they're looking into this story from all angles and they're looking backwards. You know what I mean? They're not just trying to figure out what happened that day. They're trying to figure out what happened leading up to that day. Were there any conversations? Was there any acknowledgement by anyone that there was something wrong with this sub? You know, maybe they talked about it on the ship and it was picked up in recordings. So I'm really interested in figuring out what is on those recordings and why they feel like it's so necessary for them to gather that information for their investigation. Because if you ask me, if they're simply trying to figure out why the sub imploded, recordings from the mothership's not going to help you, considering the fact that there's no communication between the sub and the mothership. But as far as the recovery efforts go, I've already told you how I feel about this. If you haven't heard, I feel like they should leave the pieces of the OceanGate sub down there with the wreckage of the Titanic. This was another historical moment that had something to do with the Titanic. We had 5 people on board. We know at least a few of them were dedicated Titanic experts. One of them was deemed Mr. Titanic, had dived down to the Titanic like 37 times and died on his 38th time. I think that there's something almost oddly beautiful about the fact that, you know, they died doing something that they were interested in. Leave the pieces of the sub down there, and they, all 5 of them, will be forever immortalized right alongside the Titanic. Because at the end of the day, we could look at it however we want to look at it. It really feels to me like the Titanic claimed some more lives. And I think that their final resting place and the final resting place of this sub should be right there at the bottom of the ocean next to the Titanic. And let the pieces of that sub and the parts of that sub serve as a warning to everyone who goes down there in the future. That, hey, y'all better have your ish together and to make sure your subs are regulated and tested so you don't end up like OceanGate. So I think they should leave that stuff down there. Also, I mean, let's think about all of the money that it's going to cost to get it. That's an angle that I usually wouldn't even care about or think about. But at the end of the day, how much money has already gone into these rescue efforts? Now you're going to put more money into trying to get the pieces of this craft from the bottom of the ocean. For what? Because we want to figure out how this not... We already know what went wrong. You can investigate all freaking day. We know what went wrong. You could literally take a 7-year-old and put them in front of that craft and they could probably tell you what went wrong. It was very obviously not safe. It was built from the wrong materials, controlled by a video game remote, piloted by a madman that just wanted his inventions to work and his business to be successful. It was all just one big recipe for disaster, and we already know the ingredients of that recipe. I just named a few of them. We know the ingredients of the recipe of disaster that is OceanGate. We don't need to spend $6 million taxpayer dollars to find out why the sub imploded. None of us really give a damn why it imploded because none of us want to go to the bottom of the ocean in a tin can anyway. And regardless, we already know why it imploded. And if you're a submarine expert, you should damn well know. If I know, and you know watching this video, these experts say, oh, we got to do an investigation. We got to find ways to spend millions of your dollars. You don't need it. We don't want an investigation. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I want an investigation into the recordings. I want an investigation into OceanGate and things of that nature. That's what we need to be focused on. Is why in the hell this was allowed to happen in the first place. We know what happened to the sub. So I don't think any time should be wasted on trying to figure out, well, why did the carbon fiber not work? Well, we know. Well, why did the glass didn't work? We know. We know what went wrong with the sub. I want to find out why this was allowed to happen in the first place, how much nonsense happened along the way, and now it's coming out that OceanGate got like $500,000 almost in PPP loans. I'm telling you. And I told y'all since day one, there's a lot more to this story, and it's going to continue to unravel, and I will be right here to unravel it with you all. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all in the next video.